Hello everyone, Privyet. It's a pleasure to join you today, even from afar. I wish I was there with you, but unfortunately it's not possible due to COVID restrictions. But I hope we can see each other in person soon. My name is Sylvia Traganida, and I'm a senior editor of Phosphates and UAN at the Market publication, which is part of ICIS, and I'm based in London. In our weekly market publication and daily update, we cover all the fertilizer products, but I'm going to talk to you today about the phosphates market specifically, and analyze the trends seen in the market and how the market has reacted so far. Unfortunately, we do not forecast at ICIS, but I'm going to give you an overview of the outlook for the rest of the year and my view of the market. So let's start with the big one, India. In May, the government announced that it will increase the DAP and NPK subsidy to help farmers. So the domestic maximum retail price, the MRP, has remained stable so far, even though IFFCO, the big Indian cooperative, initially said it was increasing prices, but then the government asked the companies to keep selling product at old prices. So Q1 is usually the slow quarter for India, but since the beginning of the year, we have seen DAP CFR prices rise, as offers increased due to the tight availability and products kept coming to the country from previous purchases. Also, all raw material prices have gone up in the past year, as we have seen, and especially phosphoric acid in India. Since Q1 2020, almost a year and a half ago, the price has increased by $570 per ton and broken the psychological barrier of $1,000 per ton at $1,160 per ton for Q3. Prices over $1,000 have not been seen for more than a decade in the market. Of course, this increase has put a strain on production costs in India, and we have seen a high number of imports, so from April to July this year, 2.19 million tons of DAP have arrived, with half coming from China. Just to compare it, in April 2020 to March 2021, 5.83 million tons of DAP arrived at Indian ports, mainly from Saudi Arabia, China, and Morocco. So let's turn to China now. The country has almost recovered from a year of COVID pandemic, and phosphate production is back to normal. Actually, production rates at Chinese domestic plants are stable, at 65% for DAP and MAP. Most phosphate producers are based in the Hubei province, as you can see on the slide, which was the epicenter of the pandemic and were hit hard, of course. However, production is going well now, and producers have increased DAP export offer prices due to the tight availability in the country. In July, China's state-owned Asset Supervision and the Administration Commission of the State Council held a meeting in order to ensure stable supply and prices for fertilizers. It was heard that PetroChina, Sinopec, CNOOC, Sinochem, State Development and Investment Corporation, China Coal, and China National Salt Industry Group all suspended exports with recovery timing unclear. The suspension of exporting urea and fertilizers was in a bid to ensure supply in the domestic markets against the backdrop of extremely tight supply and rising prices of major raw materials. Since then, producers are focusing on the export market now, as demand from India and Pakistan is increasing, as we will see later. Fertilizer prices in China have increased in record numbers this year due to high demand from most regions, lower production domestically, and high energy costs. Also, flooding around China's central Henan province has affected production at some plants. However, we have seen heavy congestion at Chinese ports, which is set to remain in the near term amid uncertainty over the length of recent COVID-19 restrictions imposed by the government to stem further outbreaks. The disruption at ports in China following the closure of the Meishan terminal at Ningbo in mid-August has stoked worries of additional supply chain disruptions and delays, which could result in even higher freight rates for chemical product shipments. Fertilizer shipments have also been affected, and freight rates continue to be high on most routes. On the other side of the world now, let's have a look at the Americas. Earlier in the year, the US Department of Commerce, the DOC, issued countervailing duties on phosphate fertilizer imports from Russia and Morocco, which will remain in place for at least 5 years. This investigation was started last summer by Mosaic, and as we have seen, the duties did not affect the spring planting, as product was already in place when the duties were announced. However, the summer field program is expected to be affected, and indeed it has already, as prices have risen due to the tight availability at NOLA, and also Mosaic keeps increasing domestic barge prices for DAP and MAP. So the lack of Russian and Moroccan product in the US has allowed other producers, of course, to increase their shipments to NOLA, for instance Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Australia, Mexico, and Jordan, as we will see later. On to Latin America now, and especially Brazil, which has also seen a lot of activity in Q2. Brazil MAP prices are now over $700 per ton CFR, having risen almost $300 per ton since the beginning of the year. Offers have increased from Morocco, Saudi Arabia, the US, and we have also seen a lot of vessels of MAP 1152 arriving from China. Brazil had issues this year with adverse weather and, of course, the COVID pandemic that has affected the market too. Let's look now at what the future holds for the phosphates market for the rest of the year. Of course, it will be all about India in the third and fourth quarters. We're expecting DAP buyers to return to the market soon, and we have already seen a few purchases as the monsoon has been normal and there's strong demand in the country. A big question mark is what OCP will do with the phosphoric acid contract prices for Q4 in India. A few people said that following successive increases the past year and a half, we might see a decrease or a rollover as DAP prices are softening and raw material prices like sulfur and ammonia are stabilizing. However, OCP might still surprise us. Negotiations are expected to take place towards the end of September between OCP and its Indian customers. So far, it is cheaper to import DAP rather than produce it domestically using phosphoric acid. Of course, Indian producers will still have to buy phosphoric acid for DAP and NPK production. However, something's got to give in terms of DAP purchases. The subsidies have been increased, but at the moment DAP prices in India are not workable, so the MRP needs to be increased too. So speaking of DAP prices, Chinese availability is normal for this time of year, and producers are looking at the export market for demand. DAP prices out of China are up, and there are expectations of demand in the Indian subcontinent for the rest of the year. India and Pakistan are expected to be the main drivers of the phosphates market until the end of 2021. Moreover, Bangladesh closed its long-awaited import tender for 700,000 tons of DAP, and a few Chinese cargoes have already been awarded for shipment by mid-October. The award of this tender gave some much-needed price direction to the market and, of course, absorbed some tons. Turning to the Americas now, the summer fill is almost done, but the big issue is, of course, availability and the countervailing duties. OCP has appealed the import duties, and we're waiting to see what is going to happen and whether the Moroccan and Russian producers will stop sending cargoes to NOLA altogether as a worst-case scenario, and where these cargoes will end up. So far, we have seen producers outside Morocco and Russia send more cargoes to NOLA, like Egypt, Australia, Mexico, and Saudi Arabia. And speaking of which, JPMC from Jordan signed an agreement recently to supply 400,000 tons of DAP for North and South America for shipment from July to February next year, which constitutes its entire annual production. Of course, 400,000 tons is a drop in the ocean for the Americas, but it is something better than nothing. This means that JPMC will have no DAP available for India, which is its usual customer until the end of the year, but it will continue shipping phosphate rock to the country. And last but not least, Brazil. MAP buying for the soybean season is over, and participants are expected to return to the market towards the end of the year to make purchases for the next season. Moreover, there's still some demand left in Argentina for DAP and MAP until the end of the year. And closer to home, European demand is expected to be strong in Q3, as high offer prices and adverse weather during the year have kept purchases low. In the domestic Ukrainian market now, as you know, most of the NPK comes from Belarus. Due to the sanctions imposed on Belarus, other producers can fill in that gap, like Yara. However, the issue remains for NPK producers who get their potash from Belarus. Already Yara has said that it will decide on its further presence in Belarus by December, following the latest sanctions imposed on the country. Yara was a leading buyer of potash from the Belarus state-run potash miner Belarus-Kali in 2020, and it sources potash from the country for the production of NPK fertilizers. So far, the UK, US, and Canada have put fresh sanctions on MOP fertilizer imports from Belarus in August, as we know. One other factor that's expected to affect the market for years to come is the legal framework and restrictions that govern fertilizer trade. We have seen already the sanctions imposed on Belarus and Iran. International fertilizer trade flows continue to be affected by tensions and barriers, with new developments for UAN and NPKs. According to the International Fertilizer Association, IFA, more fertilizer producers are seeking registration in high-standard certification programs. Phosphogypsum management regulatory requirements in China and the Green Deal in the EU, as well as implementation of emissions trading and carbon schemes across the world, are expected to have wider implications for the evolution of the fertilizer industry going forward. In recent years, the pace of trade liberalization has slowed, while restrictive trade measures have increased. Trade policy actions in 2019 and 2020 impacted movements of commodities, including fertilizers. They comprised a variety of initiatives such as trade defense measures, import bans, lifting of export tariffs, and administrative import barriers. The industry sectors affected by trade barriers include UAN, AN, NPKs, and other country-specific sanctions, for instance against Iran. Also in Europe, the European Commission has set limits for a range of contaminants, such as cadmium, contained in mineral fertilizers. This will affect all phosphate producers that export phosphate rock and processed phosphates to Europe. The producers expected to be affected are not the major Russian producers, but the smaller ones like Senegal. In the nitrogen market now, CF Industries announced in June it had submitted petitions to the relevant US departments to investigate imports of UAN from Russia and Trinidad into the US, so let's see how that develops. Now, there are a few production plants expected to come on stream in the next few years. In this slide, you can see some of the biggest ones. In conclusion, phosphates consumption is expected to increase as the world population grows. According to IFA, the global phosphate rock supply is expected to increase from 239 million tons in 2019 to 261 million tons in 2024, an increase of 9% over the period. Africa would be responsible for 72% of the net increase during this time. Global phosphoric acid capacity is expected to increase by 11% compared with 2019 to 64.4 million tons of P2O5 in 2024. In China, several new plants are forecast to be commissioned, but will be partially offset by closures. In the next 5 years, 1.3 million tons of P2O5 phosphoric acid capacity is forecast to start up in China, offset by 510,000 tons P2O5 of closures. Global processed phosphates capacity is projected to rise by 14% from 98 million tons in 2019 to 112 million tons of product by 2024. Africa will be the largest contributor to capacity growth during this period, especially OCP. We have also seen a lot of new projects expected to come on stream in Africa, particularly for NPK blending. Expansion is also seen in Eastern Europe, Central Asia, West Asia, and South Asia. The global supply of phosphoric acid would increase by 1.6% per year between 2019 and 2024, while demand will grow at a slower rate of 1.1% per year. The potential surplus has decreased marginally in 2020, increasing thereafter until 2024. New capacity is forecast to be centered in Africa and Eastern Europe, and capability is forecast to outpace demand growth in these regions. The regional markets with the fastest growing gap between local capability and demand growth are Latin America and South Asia. In this slide, you can see our ICIS fertilizer trade flow map and the DAP trade. If you want a copy, please let me know. So this is it from me. Thank you very much for your attention. If you have any questions on phosphates or UAN or any other product, please feel free to email me or reach out on LinkedIn. Thank you and enjoy the rest of the conference, and hopefully see you in person next year.